Hey everyone, and welcome to Backseat Sports. I'm Josh, and unfortunately Caleb is not with us today. He's out of town with family, but we have a ton to talk about. Obviously, Nebraska plays Wisconsin in a just massive, crucial game this weekend in Lincoln. And so we'll be talking about the X factors, keys, and breaking down the strengths and weaknesses of Wisconsin, and then getting into predictions as well. So we'll have a lot to go through there. And of course, we got to react to the Nebraska-Michigan game. Obviously, did not go Nebraska's way, and we can probably just start there. Of course, Michigan ended up winning 34-3. They barely beat the 30.5-point spread. I definitely hated to see that, but obviously the biggest news was that Casey Thompson ended up not playing in the game. So we can kind of start on the offensive side here. Realistically, there's not that much to talk about when it comes to takeaways on the offensive side. I mean, the O-line stood no chance. That's as close as you're going to get. They were obliterated, and it's not surprising from the talent of Michigan's front seven. But I mean, like, we only had 71 passing yards in this game, 3.7 per completion, and 2.6 yards per carry, only 75 yards. And Chubba Purdy, our quarterback, was the leading rusher with only 39. So it was as ugly as it could get. And you can see what happens when, a team whose strength is our vertical passing game goes up against a defense whose only weakness is vertical passing, and then you lose the quarterback who does the vertical passing. You're not going to score very many points, and that's exactly what happened, and that's about as straightforward as you got to be on the offensive side. Defensively, though, there were some really interesting takeaways, and we've kind of been talking about the progression of this defense since Bill Busch took over for Eric Shenander when he was fired midseason. And this was, even though you gave up 34 points, there were a lot of actually very positive takeaways. And the highlight was true freshman Ernest Hausmann, who we've talked about a lot this year, obviously. I mean, without a doubt, his best game as a Husker, like, that's just hands down. 10 total tackles, 8 solos, and a tackle for loss. And he was all over the field. He made a lot of really good plays, and he actually laid some huge hits in this game, which we hadn't really seen from him up until this point. And so obviously, when Nick Henrich got hurt a few weeks ago, went down with a season-ending injury, of course, the team lost the leadership, and he's a great guy. But on the field, I mean, he was, without a doubt, one of our 2 worst players most of the time. He had some good moments. But it was nothing. This game from Ernest Hausmann is the best game from any of our middle linebackers this season, which is saying something, I think, to say the least. So that was really exciting. I mean, I think the development is coming along with Hausmann exactly what you want to see, because we knew we had the speed to get to the outside, which is what this defense desperately needed from the middle linebacker to be more flexible and to be able to deal with these sweeps from the running back and things like that. Colton Feast as well had a great game. And so up front, we're seeing the improvement in the front seven with, Feast there, now Hausmann really standing out. And another great game from Garrett Nelson as well. So, I mean, you got to be really happy overall with the progression of the defense. I mean, again, inherently the offense did the defense absolutely nothing. They gave them no help at all. And so when you're in a defense in a situation like that in Michigan, I mean, you can only hold out for so long. And if the offense isn't giving you time to rest and giving you even a little bit of room for leeway against a great team like Michigan, you're not going to look effective out there. And also, before the game, Miles Farmer was suspended, our starting safety, for a DUI. And obviously, like, losing him in the passing game is definitely a negative, but we did a great job of replacing him, and guys stepped in and made plays, and that was really positive overall. So even though we lost 34-3, I think you can walk away with at least some positives, especially on the defensive side, and then you just kind of wonder what would have happened if Casey ended up playing. So, all right, let's head into Wisconsin and talk about this game. So right now, Wisconsin's opened as about 13-point favorites. So that's pretty significant, especially considering the over-under is 39.5. So that means the odds makers are kind of seeing like a 27-13 or something type score in this game, which I think is a little strange. We'll talk about that, of course, more in a little bit. PFF has Wisconsin power ranked 39th, has Nebraska at 88. And of course, Wisconsin is currently 5-5 overall. And naturally, they fired Paul Chryst after starting 2-3 and 0-3 against Power 5 teams because they lost to Washington State, Ohio State, and Illinois, which, to be fair, those losses aren't looking as bad now, especially the Illinois loss. And I mean, even the Washington State loss, they've been a really competitive team in the Pac-12. Those losses definitely don't look as bad now. And then you come out They promote Jim Leonhard, their defensive coordinator. 40 years old, Wisconsin alum. He's done a great job underneath Paul Chryst, and of course with this defense. After he got promoted, they came out and immediately just dominated Northwestern 42-7. But then they lost like a really weird game at Michigan State, 34-28. There was some really bad weather in that game. But Michigan State could have easily won that game by multiple touchdowns considering some of the turnovers. And then they play Purdue at home. They beat Purdue 35-24. Then they play Maryland in a really wet, terrible weather game. Like, I will say that game really played into the favor of Wisconsin. Considering the weather and how they want to run the ball. It was unfortunate for Maryland to say the least, but still Wisconsin looked very, very good. And then Wisconsin went to Iowa and in a strange game lost 24-10. There was a lot of things in that game, and we'll talk about quite a few of those, but basically it came down to turnovers and special teams. Shocker, a classic Iowa game. My goodness. There was a punt block, a pick six, and a huge punt return that brought Iowa down to the side, like the 10 or 15 or 20 yard line, something like that in that game. And so it was just a strange football game to watch. And it's still unclear how great Wisconsin actually is. They seem to be a solid team for sure, and this defense is incredible, and offensively they have a lot going for them, but they haven't put the wins together like they feel like they absolutely should have this year. So on the offensive side, obviously it's highlighted by really both sides of the ball. It's kind of highlighted by three players, but on the offensive side, of course, it starts with Braylon Allen. His size, his speed, it's insane. The dynamic is unbelievable. He has massive size and he has legit speed to the outside, and like his size kind of similar to a Derrick Henry, where it doesn't look like he should be able to bounce it outside. Braylon Allen does exactly that, and he has a lot of speed. It's really impressive. Outside of Braylon Allen and how they want to run the ball, of course, they have Graham Mertz, they have Kamari DK, and that combo of Mertz and DK is dynamic, to say the least. And Mertz is a really interesting player. Inherently, Wisconsin lives and dies. They live through Braylon Allen, and then Mertz can make some unbelievable plays. But man, Mertz gets in his own way at some really bad times. And basically, he just tries to get a little bit too creative sometimes. Sometimes he'll get too creative with his release angle and try to make a play he shouldn't try to make. Or sometimes he just gets a little bit too cocky and tries to force a ball in there that he shouldn't, and he tries to rely on his arm strength. Like for example, the Iowa pick six. He basically didn't set his feet, tried to zing the thing out there and to the sideline, and of course it was a little bit underthrown behind the receiver, picked off, returned for a touchdown. These are throws that he shouldn't try to make unless he has his feet set, but he gets a little bit too cocky sometimes. Similarly, there's weird times where it felt like when he anticipated pressure, inherently he didn't have to be under pressure. He just had to anticipate the pressure. And sometimes when the anticipation of the pressure made him throw errant, or he would just rush the process a little bit and would cause for some problems and make some bad decisions. So inherently, I like the idea of trying to pressure Graham Mertz and forcing him to make quick decisions, which we'll talk about, in the X factors. Inherently, the overall, in a big perspective, their offense does a great job of utilizing play action. Of course, when you have such a dynamic player like Braylon Allen, you want to use the play action effectively, and they definitely do. They run a lot of sideline comeback routes off play action to make the throws really easy for Graham Mertz, and they don't ask Mertz to do too much most of the time, and they have a solid receiving core with Kamari DK, Skylar Bell, Keontae Lewis, those three guys especially, who make a lot of plays for him, and most of the time Mertz is very comfortable and has easy lanes to throw into, and you feel really good about that. I think Mertz is at his best when he's climbing the pocket, setting his feet, and zipping the ball in there. And when he has those opportunities, he's very dangerous. And him and DK have connected on quite a few big time plays in situations like that. So overall, obviously, they have an unbelievable tendency to rip off 30 or 40 or 50 yard runs. I haven't actually seen a stat for this, but I would assume they're in the top 5 or maybe first in the country in runs of over 20 yards. Whether it's Braylon Allen or it's Isaac Guerendo, both of them have been very good. Braylon Allen's averaging 5.4 yards per carry on the season. Guerendo's averaging 6.3 as the backup, and Braylon Allen already has over 1,000 yards, 1,029 on 189 attempts, and 10 touchdowns with a long of 96 yards, and Isaac Guerendo has a long of 89 yards. And they're really effective at utilizing end arounds, even off play action. And they have a really dangerous offense, even though they don't try to do too much. So I really like how they run their offense. Modern Big Ten offense, and it's really fun to watch. So on the defensive side, it's just another elite defense Nebraska's facing. It's been a pretty insane stretch now. I mean, Illinois, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa here of just great defense after great defense. They do a lot of things really well, and specifically it's forcing turnovers, and a lot of that comes down to the playmakers they have in their secondary, but they have a great player basically at every single level of the field. Let's start off with the stats here. I mean, they're third in opponent interception percentage. 4.78% of pass attempts turn into interceptions, which is insanely impressive. And then they're ninth in opponent yards per rush at 3.1, 14th in opponent yards per play at 4.6, and 15th in opponent yards per game at 315. So they keep the ball in front of them. They do a great job of forcing turnovers, disguising their defenses, and a lot of that comes off the instincts of some of the individual players on their defense. For me, this defense starts actually in the secondary, which is surprising considering their strength, because John Torchio is a legit X factor. He's a playmaker and has incredibly unique instincts, and he's a ball hawk. I mean, he has 5 interceptions on the season and 2 touchdowns, which is crazy in itself. They use him in some really interesting ways. Oftentimes, he drops down into the middle of the field, kind of in like a robber or Tampa 2 type of coverage. Whether it's coached or whether it's just his instincts, he runs incredibly aggressively up to the line of scrimmage to make plays. One of his pick sixes was on a tight end, on like a little tight end curl or maybe a little in route. He was playing from cover 2 and just bolted up to the line of scrimmage like the second the play started, made the play, return it for a touchdown. It's like, oh my goodness, insanely impressive. And so John Torchio immediately jumps out as a worry in the passing game. And even if Casey Thompson's playing, it seems like Torchio could find one in this game, considering how well he disguises his coverages and how quick he is to react to the ball being snapped. It's really, really impressive. So like I said, kind of each level has their guy, and obviously Torchio's that guy in the secondary. In the linebacking core, I mean, I think you can include Nick Herbig right here. Obviously, they also have Brian Sanborn, so they have a very dynamic linebacking core, and they do a lot of really, really good things, and this is why their defense is so good. But Herbig does it all. As an edge rusher, and he can drop back into coverage, and he's really respectable in coverage as well. I mean, he has 11 sacks on the season. After seeing what he did to Iowa's offensive line and their right and left tackles in that game, I am really scared to see what Nick Herbig can do in this game against Bryce Benhart and Turner Corcoran. Whoever's back there at quarterback for us, they're going to be terrorized all game by Herbig. It seems inevitable. And then up front, kind of the big nasties, you've got Keanu Benton, who could easily be an elite NFL player. He is a huge, just physical presence up front, and he's just a really well-balanced nose tackle. And I think those 3 just jump off the page immediately as guys who you have to respect in the Big Ten, and they have a lot of talent on the defensive side, and it definitely shows. Like, obviously, they're not going to be as dominant as Michigan, because maybe I don't think they have as many playmakers, and doesn't feel like they're as deep as Michigan is. But at the top, they have guys who can compete definitely with Michigan's talent. With those 3 for sure. It's really, really impressive to say the least. With how Jim Leonhard coaches this team and calls this game on third downs, they are incredibly aggressive. Like on 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 3, they have no problem sending 7 players to attack it, and then they'll send them off the edge. Like in the Maryland game, I think there was like a 3rd down where Maryland was like 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 3, and they hand the ball off, and it may have been Herbig, I can't remember, but one of the linebackers got there, but like literally as Talia was handing the ball off. Like it was insane. Like they'll just sell out and try to make plays on 3rd down. It's really cool. I like how they call those games. Feels like how I would call a game in Madden or something. They'll just full send for some of those plays on third down. At the end of the day, their defense forces your quarterback to be very accurate and make timely plays. You have to be willing to take what they give you. Like I think in the MSU game, I thought Peyton Thorne did a really good job with Jaden Reed of just kind of taking what the defense gave him. Underneath, taking the little 5-yard in route, whether it's just a little dump off pass. You have to play smart against this defense. They make you play within your means. You have to take advantage of the 1 or 2 big shots they're going to give you downfield. If you don't, you're not going to score very many points against this defense. Inevitably, it's just a really well-coached team. So with that said, I think I'm already kind of hinting at the X factors. So we can head right into the X factors and keys to the game. I mean, the first two, I'll just repeat that same point. Taking what the defense gives you and playing patient football as a quarterback is crucial against this defense, and playing smart football because they're going to make you make mistakes if you don't. The biggest X factor right now is who's going to be at quarterback for Nebraska. I mean, is it going to be Casey Thompson or is it going to be Logan Smothers? Because Chuba Purdy is hurt and was going to have surgery, so he's going to be out. And currently, Mickey Joseph's most recent update was that Casey seemed like he practiced a little bit more than Logan did. They're both currently a little banged up still. And Casey has the nerve issue in his hand, and Logan was hurt as well in the Michigan game. So it's an ugly situation for Nebraska at quarterback right now. Like Casey was a game time decision last week. I would assume Casey starts this game. If he doesn't, I mean, chalk this one up because it's not going to be pretty. Basically like last week. One of the biggest X factors for me is I think it comes down to Whipple's play design. I mean, realistically, these next 2 weeks are going to have to be the most creative, I think, design that Whipple's had this whole season. I mean, he needs some aces in his sleeves, and I hope there are some aces in his sleeves. Like we haven't really haven't ran one trick play all season. We've really gotten away from the sweeps. We haven't used much misdirection in this game, in this season, compared to many others or many other teams in the Big Ten. Overall, a more complex offense, which again, it's hard to do when your quarterbacks aren't healthy, but that's what it's going to take to beat these great defenses like Wisconsin and Iowa. So I really hope we can see a creative Whipple in this game. And because Whipple got hurt in the last game in the collision on the sideline, Mickey said he's trying to get Whipple to go up into the booth for this game. So maybe a different perspective on things could help Whipple call the game in a different way. I mean, you never know. As for another X factor, I think the penalties and turnovers in this game are interesting because Wisconsin is currently 103rd, in their own turnover percentage. They turn the ball over on 3.43% of plays, which is fairly high. And they're 108th in penalties per play. So they have a high rate of penalties. Obviously, Nebraska's no better in the INT category. We're 120th, but we are better in penalties. Currently 38th in penalties per game. We've been fairly disciplined this year, especially compared to previous years. We all know that we can make mistakes, but we also know that Graham Mertz can make some big time mistakes. And realistically, it's probably going to come down to turnovers in this game, like many games do. And you got to keep your eye on that. But penalties are sneakily underrated, something that could potentially favor Nebraska in a game like this at home. That's interesting for sure. The defensive play calling is going to be really interesting for me. I think this is the other X factor. Inherently, the one-on-one matchup of Quentin Newsome and Kamiri DK on the outside is going to be pretty huge in this game, because if Newsome has success outside on DK, then you feel more comfortable bringing a safety up to try to full send to stop the run. If you're losing that battle outside, then suddenly it starts to get really ugly where you have to play more cover 2 and keep the ball in front of you. And then suddenly Wisconsin's ripping off 10, 15, 20-yard runs on you like it's nobody's business. And then the game's over and you lost by 25. So you got to keep the ball in front of you. Inherently, in a game like this, if you go down 10-0 early against Wisconsin, you just play right into their hand. Exactly what they want to do is run the ball, not ask Graham Mertz to do too much. And they are unbelievably good at that. So you've got to strike early and take advantage of the scripted drives on like the opening drive or something like that to get some points on the board early and let you play your own game, or else Wisconsin starts dictating the game really quickly. So with all of that said, it's prediction time. I'm going to have to give 2 predictions. One if Casey plays, one if he doesn't. So let's start with if Casey plays. I like our odds, although considering the 13-point spread, considering the 39.5 point over under, I think I'm fairly close to that overall. I would definitely pick Nebraska on the points if Casey's playing for sure. And maybe the line is considering Casey's game time decision. So once it's announced that he plays, maybe the line drops to like 10 or 9 or something like that. Inherently, I think Nebraska keeps this game close at home. And we probably should have a chance up until the end, as many of these Nebraska-Wisconsin games have been recently. I like our matchups in the passing game, but again, inherently, I just don't think our offensive line is going to be able to stay with it for a whole game. I would probably pick us to lose 24-17 in a really devastating loss if Casey plays. If Casey doesn't play, then I think we lose that spread, probably like a 17 or 20 point loss, like 27-10 or something along those lines. If Casey doesn't play, I mean, inherently, like I said, the X factors are there. I don't think we have the talent up front on the offensive line to make up for the explosiveness on the defensive side. The question is, defensively, can we keep this dynamic running game in check? If we do, then I'm really optimistic about the Iowa game, but I'm not confident going into this one that we're going to keep them in check. And inherently, our defense isn't just individually talented enough, unless Garrett Nelson takes over a game like this, but that seems unlikely, where we can force the turnovers and keep the game low enough scoring for our offense to put up like 17 or something to win. Like, I think the most realistic winning situation for us is we have a decent enough solution on the defensive side, and we win the game like 20-17, or I would definitely take the under on the points in that situation. So like a 20-17 or 17-14 type game probably would be the most likely winning situation for us. So we'll see. I would love to see your comments down below. Where do you feel like I'm missing something here? What are Nebraska's odds of winning this game? What's the best narrative for Nebraska to win this game? I want to see your comments down below. We always appreciate anything that you guys have to say. And I hope you guys enjoyed this game as much as I'm going to enjoy this game this weekend. But as always, guys, I'm Josh. Caleb will be back next week. And this has been Backseat Sports. And we'll see you next time. Go Big Red.